meets to consider 4 nominations, a nominee for Treasury Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs and 3 nominees to be members of the Social Security Advisory Board. First, Corey Tellis is nominated to be Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs, who coordinates the Treasury Department's communications with the Congress. This is a critically important position, not just for the work that this committee does, but for many others. The person in this role is key to making the Congress accurate and getting timely information that allows us to make good policy. She is, in my view, as qualified a nominee as you can get. She served as a staffer in both the House and the Senate, including 11 years working with our colleague, Senator Dick Durbin. Then she joined the Treasury's Office of Legislative Affairs, the office she is now nominated to lead. I have some personal endorsements from Senator Durbin that we'll share when we introduce the nominee. The committee is also going to consider the 3 nominees for the Social Security Advisory Board. The board is responsible for advising the President and the Congress on Social Security policy. It regularly makes important recommendations dealing with maintaining the solvency of Social Security. It includes services for beneficiaries and helping seniors enjoy a dignified retirement. For committees like ours that work hard to protect Social Security, the top-notch bipartisan reports that the board produces on a variety of issues are invaluable. The first nominee to the board is Catherine Lang. She currently serves as Director of Federal Income Security for the senior group Justice in Aging. She brings a wealth of experience navigating Social Security's disability determination process on behalf of elders and people with disabilities and advocating for changes to improve Social Security. Having started my time in public service as co-director of the Oregon Gray Panthers, I am just thrilled to have somebody with this kind of background in legal aid for senior citizens and joining us today. The Senate has had a number of individuals who've been involved in legal aid over the years, so we kind of welcome you to the chamber that cares deeply about this great program. Next, we have Sharon Lewis. Spent nearly her whole career fighting on behalf of people with disabilities, including in my home state of Oregon. She previously served as the Department of Health and Human Services as the Principal Deputy Administrator for the Administration for Community Living. She also served on the House Committee on Education and Labor under Chairman George Miller. And I had, as a member of the other body, the chance to serve with Chairman Miller. I think Senator Crapo did. And, please, when you talk to him, convey to him our best. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. And we were veterans of many cross-country flights back in the day, as Senator Crapo will remember, where there weren't many nonstops. Finally, we have Andrew Biggs, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Brings a number of experiences with respect to issues that we'll be talking about on Social Security and retirement policy, previously serving as Principal Deputy Commissioner of Social Security and at the White House during the George W. Bush administration. Now, I think colleagues know that I have serious concerns about his nomination, given his background as one of the architects for privatization. Just a few weeks ago, the nominee argued in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that Social Security is not an earned benefit. That, in my view, represents a fundamental misunderstanding of this critically needed program and what it was designed to do. Social Security is an earned benefit, because if you don't receive it, you don't receive it until you've worked and paid into it for at least 10 years. The mission of every board member is to work towards gathering bipartisan consensus to strengthen Social Security. And should he be confirmed, I'm concerned that Dr. Biggs will be simply a megaphone for partisan ideas to deny seniors their hard-earned benefits. With Leader McConnell putting forward Dr. Biggs as the Republican nominee for the board, I'm concerned about a preference to have somebody who has actively worked to dismantle the program rather than protecting the promise that Social Security has represented for generations. I believe Ms. Tellis, Ms. Lang, and Ms. Lewis are the right people for these jobs at the right time. I intend to support their nominations. I urge my colleagues to support them. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our 4 nominees. Congratulations on your nominations, and thank you all for your willingness to serve. Today, we will first hear from Corey Ann Tellis, who is nominated to serve as Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs at the Treasury Department. This position is responsible for advising the Treasury Secretary on congressional relations. helping to formulate policy and shape the department's direction. Ms. Tellez, given your experience, you are no doubt aware of how important it is for the executive branch to cooperate and work closely with Congress, particularly the committees with direct oversight of Treasury. While I do not expect the Treasury Secretary and members of Congress to always align on policy, I do expect the Treasury Secretary and the broader Treasury Department to be transparent and accountable to all members of this committee. That means providing accurate, thorough, and timely responses to questions and letters from members, an area in which there remains much work to be done, particularly on timeliness. If confirmed, it is essential that such communication improve at Treasury in order to facilitate greater policy understanding and better represent the American people whom we serve. Moving to the other three nominees under consideration today, Mr. Biggs, Ms. Lang, and Ms. Lewis, who have been nominated to be members of the Social Security Advisory Board. These are important positions, particularly given the operational challenges facing the Social Security Administration and the long-term financing challenges facing the Social Security system. Congress established the Social Security Advisory Board to advise the President, Congress, and the Commissioner of Social Security on issues related to Social Security, supplemental security income, and the SSA's service to the public. The board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members are appointed by Congress, 2 from each political party, and the remaining 3 members are nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. No more than 2 of the President's nominees may be from the same political party. The 3 Social Security Advisory Board nominees before us today have strong qualifications, bring different perspectives and areas of expertise, and will need to move through the confirmation process together. If confirmed, I expect a commitment from the nominees to continue the board's general practice of operating by consensus and producing reports on a bipartisan basis. I look forward to hearing the nominees' testimony and their responses to questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank my colleague. I'm going to introduce our nominees. We'll then have their testimony. We've got some procedures. I think you all have been advised about that. Corey Tellez has nearly 2 decades of public service experience, including 2 years at the Office of Legislative Affairs that she's been nominated to run. Without objection, I would like to introduce into the record an introductory statement from Senator Durbin. Senator Durbin wished to speak in person on Corey's behalf, but he's got a Judiciary Committee hearing that has prevented him from being here. He personally asked me to fill in his absence and have me relate that it is his view that Corey is a very, very good staffer and as good a staffer as he has had. Andrew Biggs is the first of 3 nominees for Social Security and on the advisory board. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and brings decades of experience on Social Security and retirement policy. Catherine Lang currently serves as Director of Federal Income Security for the Senior Group Justice on Aging and has deep experience navigating Social Security's disability determination process on behalf of seniors and people with disabilities. Finally, we have Sharon Lewis, who has long advocated on behalf of people with disabilities. Her extensive experience includes service at the Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you all for being with us, and we'll go ahead with you, Ms. Tellez, to start.
Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the Senate Finance Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be considered for the position of Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs for the U.S. Department of the Treasury. I want to thank President Biden and Secretary Yellen for their support. I would also like to thank my family, my mother, my stepfather, and my sister, who have provided unconditional love and encouragement, my fiance Mike, who supports me in ways big and small every day, our daughter, who has brought more joy to our lives than we could have possibly imagined, and an amazing group of friends that have encouraged me, counseled me, and kept me humble. At a young age, I was fascinated by the stories of people who shaped our country and communities. Before I knew that public policy could be a profession, I was drawn to the ideas of creating laws to improve the community in which I grew up. My sister and I were raised in the south suburbs of Chicago by a single mother who sacrificed tirelessly to ensure my sister and I had what we needed. She taught us by example to always act with honesty and integrity in our personal and professional lives. Helping to create and implement policies to improve the lives of working families like ours has motivated me every day. After law school, I moved to Washington, D.C. to see the work of Congress firsthand, and like many congressional staffers, I started as an unpaid intern working a second job to make ends meet. Over the next 5 years, I had the opportunity to work for 3 House members, Congresswoman Cuellar from Texas, Congresswoman McCarthy from New York, and Congresswoman Halverson from Illinois. I thank these members for trusting me to serve their constituents, for teaching me how the legislative and executive branches work together in practice to best serve the American people. Whether I was working with constituents on grant applications or managing a team advancing legislation, I experienced the importance of this partnership and valued the close collaboration with Democratic and Republican administrations on issues big and small. In 2011, I joined Senator Durbin's office, where I served for nearly 11 years as his economic legislative assistant, legislative director, and finally as his deputy chief of staff. I was proud to work on behalf of constituents in Illinois, where most of my family resides today and where I still consider home. I will always be grateful for Senator Durbin and his incredible team who embody what it means to dedicate your life to helping others. During my time in the Senate, I spent many long hours, late nights, and weekends working with others to find common ground, often on challenging issues under very short deadlines. Having grown up in a large family with diverse views, I understand the importance of respectful debate and discussion. Relying on the values instilled in me by my family, I developed relationships with staff on both sides of the aisle who, like me, were motivated to help improve people's lives, even if we had different ideas about how best to do so. When I joined the Treasury Office of Legislative Affairs in 2022, I brought with me lessons learned over a 16-year career on Capitol Hill. Just to name a few, the value of bipartisanship, the willingness to compromise, and the importance of an open line of communication between Congress and the executive branch. During my time at Treasury, I have been accessible and responsive to members of Congress and their staff. If confirmed, I look forward to working and be a partner with you and your colleagues across Congress. Finally, I want to thank your staff. I understand that it's their hard work that makes a hearing like this possible, and I appreciate the professionalism that they have shown to me. I look forward to continuing this engagement if I'm privileged enough to be confirmed. Thank you, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thanks.
Chairman Wyden, I bring you greetings from Klamath Falls. And Ranking Member Crapo, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am honored that President Biden has nominated me for the Social Security Advisory Board, and I am grateful to Minority Leader McConnell for his support. I wish to thank both the majority and minority staffs for their help in preparing for this hearing. The Social Security Advisory Board's mission to advise policymakers is particularly important today. The SSA faces significant administrative challenges, such as methods for reducing improper payments. Likewise, the Social Security program as a whole faces an actuarial deficit over the next 75 years, and its combined trust funds are projected to be exhausted in 2034. It is not the board's mission to promote solutions to either administrative or solvency challenges. Rather, the board seeks to facilitate a process by which both agency officials and elected policymakers can make informed choices on behalf of the public. I believe I'm well positioned to contribute to the board's work. I served in the Social Security Administration from 2003 through 2008, rising from Associate Commissioner of Retirement Policy to Deputy Commissioner for Policy to the Principal Deputy Commissioner of Social Security, the second ranking official in the agency. I also served as Secretary to the Social Security Board of Trustees. In addition, of course, I have a long history of working on Social Security policy, including in my current position as a Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. I have published widely on Social Security and retirement issues, ranging from articles in peer-reviewed journals that have received hundreds of academic citations to op-eds designed for policymakers and the general public. I hold a bachelor's degree from the Queen's University of Belfast, Northern Ireland, master's degrees from Cambridge University and the University of London, and a PhD from the London School of Economics. It is important that the advisory board work in a collaborative and bipartisan way with no political agenda or ulterior motive. I believe the board currently operates in that fashion, and I have the experience to continue that work. Since 2016, I have served as a member of the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico, which oversees the island's bankruptcy. While the Oversight Board has always been composed of a mix of Democratic and Republican appointees, of the hundreds of difficult decisions made by the Puerto Rico Oversight Board, only a very small number were not decided by consensus. And while Social Security is itself a highly contentious issue, I have myself maintained strong and friendly relationships, even with analysts holding views opposed to my own. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the committee for the privilege of appearing before you today. I will be pleased to respond to your questions and look forward to earning your support today and in the future.
Very good. Ms. Lewis.
Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and for your consideration of my nomination. I am honored to have been nominated by the President for this important role as a member of the Social Security Advisory Board. I appreciate the opportunity to join my two colleagues, Ms. Lang and Mr. Biggs, to sit before you and answer your questions. If we are all confirmed, I look forward to joining a board with a full complement of 7 members to share ideas, to listen to multiple views, and to work together to identify and communicate recommendations for the Social Security Administration. I also want to thank my family, especially my parents, my brother and my sister, and my 3 amazing daughters, Jasmine, Zoe, and Morena, for their love, support, encouragement, and patience, without which I would not be here. Zoe asked me to tell you hello from Oregon, noting her disappointment in not being able to join me in DC this week, but also pride in her job responsibilities that kept her at home. Zoe is one of the very small proportion of supplemental security income recipients with intellectual disabilities who also works in competitive integrated employment. I'm also grateful to acknowledge Jasmine, who's been incredibly supportive of my efforts, and to thank Morena, my youngest daughter, for taking time to come and support me here today. I believe I have a unique combination of personal and professional experience that will inform my work on the board. My professional background includes serving in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as the Commissioner of the Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, the Principal Deputy Administrator for the Administration for Community Living, and the Secretary Senior Advisor on Disability Policy. While at HHS, I worked collaboratively with teams from the Social Security Administration, the Department of Labor, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to support improved employment outcomes and economic opportunity for people with disabilities. Prior to joining HHS, I also served as the Senior Disability Policy Advisor for the U.S. House Committee on Education and Labor, and as a Joseph P. Kennedy Public Policy Fellow for the Senate Subcommittee on Children and Families within the Senate Health Committee. Since leaving full-time government service 8 years ago, I've been employed with a healthcare consulting firm, Health Management Associates. As a consultant, I primarily work with state Medicaid agencies and with other stakeholders to improve policies and programs for people with disabilities and older adults, as well as their families. Additionally, I continue to volunteer with several nonprofit disability-focused organizations. Regarding my personal experience, as mom to a young adult with significant disabilities, as family to several retired older adults, and through my engagement with many people in the disability community over the past 25 years, I know firsthand both the opportunities and challenges for those who depend upon the important benefits administered by Social Security. I think understanding and respecting the experiences of both the beneficiaries who receive services and the staff who deliver those services is central to the Social Security Advisory Board's work. Hearing from these individuals and infusing their insights into policy deliberations and recommendations reminds us why it's so important to improve and sustain Social Security programs. It is our obligation to thoughtfully consider the experiences of everyday Americans alongside our efforts to analyze and consider data, research, and the perspectives of government officials, policy experts, economists, and social scientists. I also believe strongly in compromise and pursuing consensus. Should I be fortunate enough to be confirmed, I will serve in a collaborative and bipartisan manner. I will work cooperatively with my fellow board members in developing our advice and guidance to the administration. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the committee for the privilege of appearing today. I look forward to responding to your questions.
Ms. Lewis, thank you. Ms. Lang, the microphone just started working again.
Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and Senators of the Senate Finance Committee, it is a great honor to appear before you today as a nominee to be a member of the Social Security Advisory Board. I want to thank President Biden for nominating me for this position. I greatly appreciate this committee for holding this hearing on my nomination and the nomination of Mr. Biggs and Ms. Lewis today. In my 25 years as an attorney, I have been an advocate for low-income older adults and people with disabilities in a variety of settings with a focus on public benefits. Over the past decade, I have become a nationally recognized expert on the benefit programs of the Social Security Administration, in particular, the Supplemental Security Income, or SSI program, and Social Security benefits for low-income older adults. Over 7 million older adults live in poverty in the United States today. As Director of Federal Income Security at Justice and Aging, I am part of a team working to ensure that older adults in this country have access to the resources they need. We train advocates and keep them informed of the most current rules and policies at the Social Security Administration to ensure that all who qualify can access the benefits they need. We provide materials, trainings, and other information to help advocates navigate the complex rules and restrictions with their clients and stay informed about changes to or systemic problems with SSA benefit programs. I've had the opportunity to present to the Social Security Advisory Board in the past on some of my areas of expertise, including the representative payee program and streamlining the administration of SSI benefits. I also bring extensive knowledge about other areas involving SSA benefits, such as post-eligibility issues like overpayments and the SSI in-kind support and maintenance rules. I look forward to this opportunity for public service as a member of the Social Security Advisory Board. Before I conclude, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my husband, David Glenn, who's here with me today, our daughter, my parents, Frank and Pauline Lang, and members of my extended family for all of their support over the years. Again, I appreciate this committee for holding this hearing today, and I would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Okay, we now have some obligatory matters we have to go through with each of you. First, is there anything that you're aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you've been nominated? We'll just go right down the line. Ms. Tellis.
No.
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 Second, do you know of any reason, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you've been nominated?
No.
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 Third, do you agree without reservation to respond to any reasonable summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of the Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes.
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 Finally, do you commit to provide a prompt response in writing to any questions addressed to you by any senator or the committee?
Yes.
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 We appreciate the responses of all of the nominees. So, Ms. Tellis, let's start with you. And as you can tell, we really value this bipartisan effort, here in the committee. It's produced very substantial wins on a whole host of issues, and part of it is getting timely and accurate answers from Treasury. It's just the coin of the realm to do our jobs. If you're confirmed, how do you plan to work effectively with both sides of the aisle?
Thank you, Senator, for the question, and thank you once again for having me here today. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I spent 16 years on the Hill working across the aisle to advance legislation on behalf of my boss. So I understand how important those relationships are and how important it is to work in a bipartisan fashion to find common ground. I bring that perspective and that background with me when I joined the Office of Legislative Affairs nearly 2 years ago and have done my best to work with members and staff, regardless of political affiliation, to be responsive with timely answers from Treasury And I would bring that same perspective with me if I was privileged to be confirmed, and would hope to lead the office in ensuring that that Treasury provides timely and accurate responses to members and staff of this committee and beyond.
In something resembling English around here, would it be fair to say that not only are you saying you'll do it if confirmed, you've got a track record of trying to be bipartisan, working both sides?
Absolutely, sir. I have done my best over a nearly 18-year career to work with members and staff on both sides of the aisle to find common ground, and I've done my best over the last 2 years to do the same.
Thank you. We're going to move quickly because we've got a lot of ground that we want to cover. For the Social Security nominees, we have taken special interest, Senator Crapo and I and the good senator from Nevada, in this whole overpayment issue. This is really, in my view, a 4-alarm fire with respect to what we've got to do there. So my concern is we pay the right people the right amount at the right time. And back in the days when I ran the legal aid program for the elderly, this was a modest issue. Now it has mushroomed in terms of the concerns the members are hearing from, and Senator Crapo and I are going to be working together on this issue with new Commissioner O'Malley. So tell us, we'll just go right down the line for the 3 Social Security nominees. You've all had experience with the programs. You have differing views. I'd be interested, we just go start with you, Mr. Biggs, go right down the line. What should Social Security be prioritizing to reduce and prevent overpayments, and what might the board be involved in doing? Mr. Biggs.
Sure, thanks for the question. I would start by saying that particularly with SSI, where the majority of overpayments take place, the Social Security Administration faces an extremely difficult job. They are required by law to adjust benefits monthly based on both income and assets of the beneficiary. From an administrative standpoint, that's an extremely difficult job to do. At the same time, they need to come into the 21st century in terms of how they do it, of accessing more administrative data, more electronic data. At this point, they're still inputting a lot of this data by hand, which is not simply slow and costly, but can involve inputting errors, which create over or under payments. They need to use more bank account data to track assets. I think they need to work more closely with state agencies for workers' compensation, unemployment, work more closely with the Internal Revenue Service for real-time earnings data where available. It is, I'll be honest, I say I don't understand why the process of the agency has been so slow on this. Anything technology related to SSA is difficult, but obviously this is something that has to move more quickly to modernize the whole way this is structured.
Ms. Lewis.
Thank you for the question. As a parent, I have personal experience with this and can affirm how terrifying those letters are when an SSI recipient receives a letter saying you have received an overpayment, because my daughter does work on a seasonal basis, and it is impossible administratively for the Social Security Administration to keep up with the lag that occurs when her income varies over the course of the year. So I think it's very important for us to look at how do we reduce the administrative complexity for both the Social Security Administration and for beneficiaries, and understanding opportunities to make recommendations so that both the participants and the staff at the Social Security Administration can make this program work as intended.
Good. Ms. Lang.
Thank you for the question, Senator. This is an area that I mentioned in my opening statement as an area where I'm very concerned and have been working with the Social Security Administration to provide recommendations to them for areas where I believe the agency can take action now, that they don't need to wait for members of Congress, but they do have the ability within their current statutory authority to take steps to address this current crisis. As you mentioned, both with reducing or preventing overpayments before they happen, but then when they do happen, improving their waiver policies and their recoupment policies.
Okay. I'm just going to ask one question of you, Mr. Biggs, with respect to this Wall Street Journal op-ed, which I indicated is very troubling to me. I think we all understand, particularly in this very challenging political climate, finding a consensus on tough issues is no piece of cake. I mean, it is hard work and very, very difficult. But you got to get everybody to agree on the same set of facts. If you don't have that, pretty hard to go on to the next kind of effort. And when you said Social Security benefits are not earned, I said, that is a stunning judgment about a program that I have worked closely with for decades now, going back to those senior citizen days. I mean, seniors work their entire career and pay into Social Security with every paycheck. And I just remember coming up in this field, everything said Social Security, earned benefits. So how are you going to go about reaching consensus on the future of Social Security if there can't be even an agreement on basic facts about the program?
Well, like any author would have to note in these circumstances, I'll say the author does not write the headline for an op-ed, which in that case I didn't. The point I made in that piece...
So are you not in agreement with that anymore? Are Social Security benefits earned? All of us have had once or twice a headline in a news article that we didn't necessarily agree with. My friend from Nevada is looking at me because we all, Senator Crapo, we all have seen headlines. So if you're saying you've changed your position.
No,
okay,
if I might respond.
Please.
What the article said, it cited Congressional Budget Office data showing that on average, even for people retiring today or in the near future, they are promised Social Security benefits, I believe, 27% higher than the taxes they paid over their lifetime plus interest on those taxes. So the question isn't whether Social Security benefits are earned. In the sense, I mean, we're both familiar with how the Social Security benefit formula works. The issue I was raising there was the Social Security benefits have not been paid for. And this gets to questions of intergenerational fairness. That I understand if you say you have earned your benefits, therefore that puts a moral claim that your benefits should never be changed. At the same time, it should matter whether we as a generation have fully paid for our benefits. The point I made in that article, and I think if you read it, it's fairly clear, is whether we earned our benefits in this broader sense, we have not paid for them. And that should influence how we think about the burdens we place on future generations to pay for benefits that we may have earned, but we did not pay for.
So what's troubling to me is you have basically turned the debate about the generosity of Social Security, and there are 20 million people or so that stay out of poverty with this program. You're turning that into a discussion about whether benefits have been earned. I don't share that view. I think you start with the proposition that they're earned. Gave you a chance to change your mind, and I appreciate your stating your views so we now all understand them this morning. Senator Crapo.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I go to Ms. Tellis, Mr. Biggs, do you want to respond to that?
I would think if anybody, based on that discussion, has any doubts about my views, I highly encourage you to read the op-ed and not rely on the headline or characterization of the article. I would simply say that.
It seems to me that I haven't read your op-ed. I'm going to go read it. But it seems to me that the question of whether, remember when Social Security started, we had X number of workers for Y number of benefits, and that has kind of inverted. And it seems to me the question is simply here, is it fiscally sound? And if not, how do we make it fiscally sound? Is that not the issue you were discussing?
Sure. It is thinking about how we consider changes to Social Security going forward. If somebody has fully earned and fully paid for their benefit, that's not just a financial thing. There's sort of a moral claim that is made there, that it would simply be unfair to take benefits away from somebody if they had in fact fully paid for them. And in the article, I'm very clear you shouldn't, regardless, if a low-income person, regardless of whether they have fully paid for their benefits or not, you shouldn't take those benefits away. But if you have higher income Americans who are being promised benefits well in excess of what they have paid for, should they have a moral claim to tell our kids and grandkids that they therefore have to finance it? They therefore have to pay higher taxes to finance benefits that I may be promised but did not pay for. It's not, the question is not whether Social Security benefits are earned. The question is whether Social Security benefits have been paid for. And I just think you would really need to read the piece to understand it. But the idea that I'm simply saying Social Security is not an earned benefit, that it's simply a welfare benefit, that's just simply a mischaracterization of the argument I made there.
No, I appreciate that. I wanted you to clarify that. Since we're on the Social Security issue right now, why don't I just have one question for each of you to answer. We've been pulled, because of some of this controversy, we've been pulled into a discussion about how Social Security should be managed. But that's not your job, is it? I'd like each one of you, if you were confirmed, to tell me, if confirmed, do you commit to maintaining the board's bipartisan, consensus-based approach to decision-making?
I absolutely commit to doing that.
Ms. Lewis.
Thank you. I absolutely commit to it as well.
Ms. Lang.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do commit to maintaining that practice.
All right, thank you. I also have some questions for you, Ms. Tellis. First of all, as I indicated in my opening remarks, I have concerns with the Treasury Department's responsiveness. Throughout this administration, Treasury has consistently provided late responses to correspondence on tax, economics, and finance policy issues, correspondence that is essential for Congress to carry out its oversight authority. Just last year, it took Secretary Yellen around 7 months to respond to questions for the record after a Finance Committee hearing on Treasury's budget. It took the IRS Commissioner almost 8 months to respond to questions after a finance hearing on the IRS's budget and their filing season. The lack of basic responsiveness, by the way, these are just 2 examples. There are multiple examples of how, and there's correspondence we're still waiting for answers on. The lack of basic responsiveness from the administration is unacceptable. And frankly, it's highly troubling given the amount of funding provided in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. A simple yes or no question, and then I've got another one where you can elaborate. If confirmed, will you commit to being transparent and responsive to me and my staff in correspondence requests and briefings? Thank you. And now, and you can respond. This is maybe an unfair question, so you can decline to answer it if you want to, but then I'd like to let you just respond in general to the issues I've raised. The question is, do you find a time of 7 or 8 months delay to a response acceptable?
Thank you, Senator, for the question, and thank you for raising your concerns with me. I deeply respect the role that Congress plays related to policymaking and oversight responsibilities, and I understand how important it is to receive timely, accurate responses from the administration and the Treasury Department. So I commit to work with you and your staff to do our best to respond in a timely manner with accurate information.
All right, one last question. In the case of different interpretations between Congress and the Treasury with respect to tax law changes, what steps will you take to ensure that all voices are heard and that the administration's preference on regulatory guidance does not overstep congressional intent?
Thank you, Senator. I think the role of Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs is to ensure that voices in Congress and stakeholders are heard by the department, elevated respectfully within the department as decisions are being made, and I would commit to work with you and your staff to ensure that happens.
Thank you.
I would say to my friend, I went, I think, 7 or something. Would you like to go and finish up? Or
No, I'm good.
you're in good shape? Okay. Our colleague from Nevada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the ranking member. I'm curious because this is going to be the dynamic for the board. Ms. Lewis or Ms. Lang, do you care to respond to what Mr. Biggs said about earned benefits at all, or any of the comments that he made in his position? I want to put you on the spot right now, but just curious because this is what the dynamic will be, and I would like to see it play out in front of me.
Well, thank you, Senator, for asking us. I'll just say that I am very familiar with Mr. Biggs's work and his position, and I look forward to being on the board and engaging with his perspective and the perspectives of the other members as well. I don't think that any one person gets to drive the agenda of the board. I think we have to work together collaboratively.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Ms. Lewis.
And thank you for the question. I also believe that we need to work towards consensus and that the role of the board is to be a place where we can try to find common ground in our work, regardless of our political backgrounds. And I look forward to working with Mr. Biggs and having conversation, debate to come to good recommendations.
Thank you. Mr. Biggs, thank you for your clarification. I do look forward to reviewing that article. I appreciate that. Ms. Tellis, welcome as well. I appreciate the work that you've done already. Look forward to further working with the Treasury. We've been great partners on the Inflation Reduction Act and so many other areas. I actually plan to send a comment letter to Treasury soon on the proposed rule for the 45X tax credit and some issues concerning critical minerals. So I look forward to further collaboration, and I hope that's the case. I also hope that, from what I just heard from the ranking member, Treasury is responsive to all of our colleagues, not just some of them. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't have much time, so I'm not going to ask you any questions. I do want to jump to SSI because I do appreciate the background and the work that you have done. In my family, I have somebody also on SSI. Let me just tell you, the challenges for somebody with disabilities is just, it's too much. The time lag, every other issue, it is a challenge, and I can't figure out why. And so maybe let me just start with Ms. Lewis, with you. It seems to be, there's got to be more than just the issue of modernization and technology. What recommendations would you have, or what do you bring with you from your experience on how we should address this issue?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that SSI is a program that the Congress needs to be taking a hard look at in terms of asset limits, the opportunities to manage the program. When an individual can find themselves in an awkward position of an overpayment because their savings account hit $2,001, I think that speaks for itself.
Right.
And those are challenges that I look forward to researching and analyzing as a member of the Social Security Advisory Board, and so that we can put forward recommendations on how the Congress might address those concerns.
I look forward to those recommendations as well. Ms. Lang, similarly, and also approach it from, I'm curious, because you've been before us providing recommendations. How would you then turn it around and do the outreach to stakeholders as well, and getting more people, more input in as well?
Yes, the SSI program is just so complicated because it's rules upon rules, that there are just so many complications. There's a rule, and then there's an exception to that rule, and then there are 4 exceptions to the exception, and just it becomes too burdensome to administer for the agency. So I think there is definitely a role for the advisory board to make recommendations about ways it can be streamlined, and some of those complications can be reduced or eliminated.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for your willingness even to serve. I appreciate it, and welcome to all of your family members. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank my colleague, again, longtime advocate of Social Security, and our subcommittee point person, Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Cortez Masto, thank you for bringing up a really important issue. Mr. Biggs, I'll start with you. I'm concerned about your record on Social Security, as you know, which is a bedrock of our middle class. People earn and pay into their whole lives. This committee has been terrific understanding pensions, as Senator Chair Wyden has understood, in restoring people's lost pensions. My concern is the role you played in President Bush's effort to divert payroll tax contributions from the trust funds to a private savings account. In other words, you advocated privatizing Social Security. You and your allies back off that sometimes, saying you're not, but you have been, to let Wall Street gamble with people's guaranteed retirement security, as most of us in this committee find abominable. That was just a few years before the 2000 crash. If workers had followed your plan back then, we all know what would have happened to a generation of American Social Security. So many Americans would have lost most of their savings. My first question, do you think Social Security should be privatized?
No, I do not.
Okay, to be clear, my concern with your views on Social Security aren't just about the past. These are your present-day views. Just last month, you wrote in the Wall Street Journal, no, Social Security isn't earned. You've also written before about raising the Social Security retirement age. Do you think Congress should raise the Social Security retirement age?
I have not proposed raising the Social Security retirement age. I'm aware of an article that responded to where I cited some comments I made in a congressional hearing where I said it was not an unreasonable idea. Over the past 12 years, I have put forward 3 different written frameworks for how I would reform Social Security. None of them included an increase in the Social Security retirement age.
You've also said all options should be on the table, and that includes, I assume, raising the retirement age and privatizing Social Security when you say all options should be on the table.
I don't believe I said all options should be on the table. I think Congress should keep all options on the table if you wish to have a bipartisan agreement. I have not argued for raising the Social Security retirement age. I don't believe I've written anything in favor of private accounts since the Bush experience in 2005, so that's 18 years ago.
I mean, I've watched you and I've watched your allies and administrations over the years when you have power make suggestions to a number of Wall Street Journal and conservative publications and Heritage Foundation and all those allies. Your allies seem to clearly, they don't like Social Security. They don't really need Social Security. I mean, most of the people that takes these positions of privatization, of raising the retirement age, you could live the rest of your lives, however long you live after retirement. If you ever retire, you could live it in enough comfort that you don't really need that $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 a month. And I think back of who's making these sort of admonitions to us, who's saying that Social Security, all options are on the table, privatization's okay, all that. It's people who wear suits all day and sit at a desk, people like you, people like me, raising the retirement age. But I don't. Maybe if you spent more time, I don't want to lecture you, but maybe if you spent more time talking about people that work at the McDonald's drive-thru, or people that are steel workers, or people that are on their feet all day, by the time they're 45 or 50 or 55, their bodies are pretty worn out. Yours, I mean, if your health is generally good, your body isn't worn out by doing the kind of work you do, the kind of work I do. But people who work hard, I mean, the building trades start work at 18 or 20, a pipe fitter or a construction worker of some kind. They pay into retirement. They can retire at 55 because their bodies wear out. I've looked at police officers that are 50 that their bodies have worn out. They have physical jobs with challenges all day long, yet they're Social Security matters to them. And if you think about raising the retirement age, as you've advocated and others have advocated, and we've raised the retirement age, it's that much longer those people have to wait. And they typically don't live as long past 65 as people that work like you do and I do. And it's just, I guess my request and admonition is spend a little more time with servers in this society. I'll close with one story, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman. I was at an AFL-CIO dinner in Cincinnati a few years ago, and there were a group of middle-aged women sitting in the front of the room, and I went up and sat at their table, and I said, "What brings you here?" And one woman said, "We just negotiated our first union contract. I represent 1,200 custodial workers." And I said, "What does that mean, your first union contract?" She said, "I'm 51. It's the first time in my life I'll ever have a paid 1-week vacation." People like that, I mean, they're cleaning offices, our offices every day, and we expect them to work to 65 or 67. So often they don't have a retirement. So often they don't have vacation. So often they don't have health care. And it's why people hate Washington. They don't see us paying enough attention to people that work with their hands, people on their feet all day, people that struggle with the daily mess of life, and we simply don't, as a culture, and reward them for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I might, Senator, I'm fortunate enough to live in a rural area, so I'm outside of Washington, D.C. My friends include people who are plumbers, electricians, people who work in construction. I have a family friend who I help with her SSI. And so I completely understand what you're saying. What I've argued for on Social Security, I have not advocated for raising the retirement age. I've argued for increasing minimum benefits, which would raise benefits for about the bottom third of retirees and would take the elderly poverty rate from the current rate of 7% or so to 0%. So I think it's important to understand what I am, for better or worse, I have a very long written record of advocating things. And so I think it's important to understand what I've advocated for and what I've not advocated for.
Okay, thank you.
I thank my colleague, Senator Brown, and I think there's a certain irony here. You know, Senator Brown has made this very important point that people have a chance to work and be independent, one of the challenges we've been dealing with respect to disabled folks. And it is Senator Brown and Senator Cassidy and myself who've all put a lot of time into it. So I think there's a certain irony here that as we move towards the end of this hearing, I think Senator Cassidy will be the last to ask questions. We have, again, this kind of bipartisan alliance that I'm particularly appreciative that Senator Brown and Senator Cassidy has been leading, and I'm kind of one of their wingmen or something, I guess you'd say, to support it, because I think it's an important cause. Senator Cassidy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I see the position that you'll be holding would be a policy decision, at least a policy advisory position. And Mr. Biggs, I'm sorry I was out for a bit of it, so you may have already discussed this, but we all know that there is a looming insolvency of the trust fund. At that point, under current law, benefits will be cut by 24% across the board. You'll be in a position of policy. You've criticized other proposals, so I presume, and you've mentioned in your writings in the past, which you've mentioned you've had, that you got to cut benefits, at least as you approach it. You got to cut benefits or raise taxes. Which of those would you recommend?
The Social Security Advisory Board, to my knowledge, has never made recommendations.
But if you had to, I think that's important, because the whole point here is we want people with expertise. We want people with expertise who actually can weigh in and perhaps echo a good proposal or poo-poo a bad.
Okay, I just want to be extremely clear here, though, that in the role as a member of the Social Security Advisory Board, these are not the sorts of questions the Advisory Board would ever
Oh, I thought they
address.
discussed policy. Am I wrong?
If you look back at what the
Well,
Advisory Board...
But I'm just going to take it straight forward that they discuss policy. So would you cut benefits or would you raise taxes? If you were the czar for the day, what would you do?
What I've argued for is gradually, over time, transitioning to a benefit structure that is more focused on maintaining and protecting against poverty in old age for the lowest income retirees and reducing the growth, which relative to current law benefits does mean, cutting benefits, particularly at the high end and for a more limited degree at the middle.
Now, of course, the issue is that, as we know, is that Social Security cannot tell the difference between the ICU nurse who's been working at the tax max from the billionaire. It just cannot. And so the ICU nurse who's worked for 20 years at the tax max may wonder why her benefits are being reduced. We imagine, as President Biden does all the time, that it's only those making over $400,000 a year. But really, at inflation adjusted, it's $160,000 a year. So would you reduce the benefits for that person making $160,000 a year? Is that whom you, knowing that's how Social Security defines it, is that how you also define it?
Sure. If somebody who earns the tax max, which is currently about $168,000 for their full career, would retire with a benefit somewhere north of $45,000 per year. For a couple, that comes to $90,000 a year in Social Security benefits. I think that is more than that's something like 4 times the elderly poverty threshold. I think that is more
So
than is necessary.
if that couple lives in San Francisco, for example, they would say that $90,000 doesn't take them very far in San Francisco.
Sure.
But I gather from your benefit, because you're very critical of mine, which is trying to avoid that. But that assumes that there is an alternative. But I guess under your plan, the couple making $90,000 in a high-cost area would just have to move.
Well, Social Security does not distinguish between costs of living between different parts of the country. And that's, for better or worse, that is the design of the program. But my own point of view is that Social Security is intended principally as a social insurance program to protect against poverty in old age. I do think paying a couple a benefit of over 4 times the elderly poverty threshold before they've touched a penny of their own savings is probably more
But the
than is
elderly
necessary.
poverty ratio is pretty low. I mean, if you look at what poverty is, the poverty threshold is low. And so I don't know if we can look at that poverty threshold and say, oh my gosh, if you're doing better than that, you're doing pretty well. I'm just struck because it's easy to get out there and throw stones at people, but then when you get to the kind of brass tacks, where do people live and how are they going to live? It's a lot harder. And you're going to be in that role. It won't be, you know.
Okay, I do want to be very clear. The Social Security Advisory Board does not look at these sorts of questions.
Oh, I thought it
It's
said
simply-
policy.
It does
Am I
not.
wrong with that?
It does not look at those sorts of questions you raised.
I saw that it was all kind of policy. It included policy, that when Monahan came up with it, I'm seeing some heads nodding in the back, that it was supposed to be doing policy.
Board makes recommendations with respect to the program, but they don't make formal policy. So
They don't make the policy, but
Correct.
they make recommendations.
that's correct.
Right,
Yes, they make recommendations.
yeah. And that's where I was going with that.
Right.
Because really, we got to come up with a way to do this. Now, just to put a point on it, obviously, I've spoken about my big idea, which you called a capital gains tax. I'm a little bit curious about that. If the goal is that we want to hold harmless those who are less well off, and there's a marginal decline in rate of return theoretically for those because of our big idea, which I won't elaborate, but would love to otherwise, and I've spoken to different members of this committee and they know about it, that would disproportionately affect, to the degree that that marginal effect would occur, those who are better off. But it will leave that nurse who's at the tax max for 20 years basically unscathed, except insofar as she's in a 401k or something. And I say that not expecting your comment, because you've made these comments in the past. But I think it's important for the position that people advising on policy to move beyond the facile answer that sounds so great when you disassociate it from someone's life and you try and connect it with where someone lives. Ivory towers are easy places to reside. And politics is tough because we do run into these people and we do have to accommodate for them. And I say that for any of you, as you are advising on policy, move beyond the theoretical and the comfort of a sinecure, no offense, into where someone lives who otherwise has nothing else to live on. With that, I yield.
I think my colleague, Senator Tillis, is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't think I was going to be able to make it here, but I watched the exchange with Senator Brown, and he inspired me to come down here. I also saw that Senator Cassidy was next, and I wanted to be on what I consider to be his wing for a very, very important discussion that we're having here that people talk past at every chance they get, and that's getting Social Security on sound footing. I decided to work at a convenience store that was literally right next door to my house in 1972. I was 12 years old. I had to apply for a work permit. Got a work permit, made my first payment into Social Security at the age of 12 in 1972, $33. And I've made payments every year since. I think that I get, Mr. Beggs, what you said about you don't propose policy, no more than the Fed will propose policy. They implement policy, they react to it. But I'd like to get just an indication from you all. Ms. Tellis, you get a pass. I intend to support your nomination. I like the fact that the people in the South pronounce my name like yours, Tellis. But in fact, I hope that I get to support all of your nominations. It's going to be largely dependent upon whether or not we have bipartisan support for the slate. But I'd like to, I'd like to get your understanding. I had a very interesting discussion with a very, very smart senator on the Senate floor about the future of Social Security. I, for one, think that we could be headed for a crisis based on the current course and speed if we don't make reforms over the next 10 years. Now, this very smart person, this was on the Senate floor, said, Tom, y'all always say that, and when we have a crisis, we write a check. Well, that may have been possible in the past, but now that we're at a point of $34 trillion in debt, there's nothing to draw on. There is no overdraft protection. If we run into solvency problems with Social Security in its current structure, it will come in the form of betraying a promise that we've made to people who are on it and people who are close to getting on it. I'm making a statement here. I want y'all to tell me either you kind of agree with it or you disagree, and everything's pink skies and flowers in the time that I have left. But we're not talking about a sea change. Senator Cassidy has done an extraordinary job of getting Republicans and Democrats together in private meetings to talk about what do we need to do here. We're not talking about Senator Brown's tradespeople who are 55 years old and suddenly changing their eligibility date. We're not talking about their 35-year-old son or daughter who may be pursuing the same thing. What we're talking about is over time changing eligibility because of the reality that we're living longer and we're healthier and we have fewer problems than we've had in the past. And if we don't start aligning our policy with the reality of demographics and indexing properly, we're not going to be able to write the check. Now, in the remaining 1.5 minutes, tell me I'm wrong, everything's happy, and we need to do nothing with respect to means testing at the high end to potentially reduce the benefit for people who really don't need it, for lifting people out of poverty and making damn sure the promise we're making today is fundamentally there for the next 2 generations behind those who are already on it. And we'll start with you, Mr. Biggs.
In the year 2034, when the trust fund is projected to run out, the cash deficit on an annual basis for Social Security will be somewhere around $450 billion in today's money. That's, even by congressional standards, that's a great deal of money. So obviously something is going to have to happen to address this. The usual caveat is in the 20 years or so that I have followed the Social Security Advisory Board's work, they do not do they don't have the sorts of discussions that I just had with Senator Cassidy. It is a separate track, but I think you're accurately characterizing the challenges that we face.
Ms. Lewis.
Thank you, Senator. I think the role of the Social Security Advisory Board is to look at issues, research and analyze, and come to a consensus across the 7 members of the board. And I think I would be both deferential and interested in debating the need for changes or reforms to the Social Security programs within the context of the board, but I'm not an economist, and at this juncture, I think I just need to promise that I will listen and I will work hard with my colleagues to make recommendations.
Ms. Legg.
Thank you, Senator. I agree with your characterization of the coming crisis in the Social Security trust funds. And, as my colleagues have mentioned, the role of the advisory board does not generally extend to the trust funds. In the coming crisis, we might feel like we need to address it, but it is the role of Congress to make the tough choices.
I just think at some point we've got to get out of the circular discussion. In reality, you will be able to spend as much time as you're willing to commit on this issue in your capacity on the board. We're going to deal with 20 different key topics before the sun sets tonight as members of the U.S. Senate. If we don't have people who are stewards over the process saying this is something you should look at, not prescribing how to fix it, but there is something other than the current course and speed that must be done, I do believe that that's within your purview, and I do think that it's critically important. Our members of the board at the time that this fails will be every bit as responsible as the members in Congress who refuse to act on it. Thank you all for being here. Congratulations on your nominations.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Cardin.
First, let me thank the four of you for your willingness to serve. These are tough times to serve in public life, and we thank you very much. I have a direct interest in the Social Security Administration for many reasons, not the least of which their headquarters are located in my community in Maryland. So we very much are concerned as to how the workforce is respected, supported, and how services are provided to the millions of people that depend upon the Social Security Administration. I do want to make a brief comment. I was not here during Senator Brown's comments, but that doesn't prevent a senator from assuming what he said and responding to it. And I want to agree with Senator Tillis. Tillis, you have a good pronunciation of your last name for credibility in this institution. We just want you to know that. And I just want to point out, retirement security is one of the major concerns for American families. And we have a three-legged stool. I've worked through my entire congressional career, starting in the House, to strengthen the private retirement options that are available for retirees. And I'm proud of the work I did with Senator Portman in enacting major legislation to give new opportunities to expand retirement security through private retirement. And I want to thank the leadership of this committee, Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo, for the work we did on Secure 2.0 that enhanced those private retirement options. That's critically important. Secondly, we need to enhance private savings, the second leg of the stool. I put forward a progressive consumption tax that rewards savings. I think we put too much of a tax on savings in America, and we should reward private savings. And then there's Social Security, which to me is the most important leg of the three-leg stool. And I applaud Senator Cassidy for his initiatives to strengthen the Social Security. I may not agree with everything on his proposal, but I do think we have to protect the guaranteed annual payment without worrying about inflation, without worrying about the stock market. We need to make sure that the guaranteed income is available and the benefits are maintained and strengthened for those who particularly need it. So I just want to point out, I think there is bipartisan agreement that we have to strengthen all three legs of the retirement security stool for the American families. But the question I want to ask you about is a more pragmatic concern. We have asked the Social Security Administration to do more with less resources over the last decades. The number of people getting benefits, the complexity of the system has only gotten more challenging, and the support for the administrative budget has only gotten lower over time. We did the right thing in confirming Governor O'Malley as the commissioner. I have a great deal of confidence that he will use the resources in the best way to provide services to those who depend upon the Social Security Administration. But my question to you is, what is your commitment to improve worker morale at the Social Security Administration? How will you work to make sure that those who depend upon Social Security can get timely responses on the phone, timely decisions on determinations, have the services in their local community that they need, including the local offices? How will you make sure that those services are protected so that the people who depend upon the benefits of the Social Security Administration can get timely advice and timely benefits determinations? Why don't we just go on down the line? I'll start with Mr. Riggs.
I think your point about worker morale at SSA is well taken. If you look at surveys of federal agencies of morale in them, Social Security tends to rank quite low there. During my time at the agency, 2003 to 2008, based on that, I couldn't tell you precisely why that is. There may be some very specific issues there, but I think there is the importance of feeling that you are making progress in your mission. And by that, I mean, going back 20 years ago when I started SSA, there was always this struggle of processing disability claims, processing SSI, dealing with improper payments. This is a long-standing issue, and so I think there probably is some frustration there that these things continue. They don't feel they're getting on top of them. So I think one thing the advisory board can do is help investigate not simply what problems exist, say, with improper payments, which we're aware of, but why has it been so difficult to get on top of these things? Why has it been so difficult to modernize the data systems so that these aren't such a difficult issue for the agency and for Americans? When people think of Social Security, they think of retirement. From the agency standpoint, it is disability and SSI, which are the real challenges, and those are very difficult programs for them to administer.
Mr. Chairman, if I could have an extra 30 seconds of Mrs. Lewis could give a brief reply, and Ms. Lang, I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you, Senator. I think, again, the role of the advisory board is to engage in understanding the why behind some of those issues in terms of the morale at the Social Security Administration, and we look forward to seeking additional information and data to understand why the morale issues are what they are. And as you note, what we've seen is the number of employees that are there to serve an increasing number of beneficiaries has become disproportionately lower over time, and I think that has to be contributive.
Ms. Lang?
Thank you, Senator. I agree with my colleagues that it is the role of the advisory board to look into these issues and bring an outside perspective. Sometimes within the agency, it's hard to see beyond what's already happening and to think of alternatives. So I think that is the role of the advisory board to bring recommendations for how to address some of the issues that the agency is facing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much. Ms. Haffajee, let me just make a, she's not here, never mind, make a separate point later when we vote. Medicare and Social Security, it is indisputable that both are headed for a fiscal cash flow cliff. So there's one fact. At President Biden's State of the Union, there was a bipartisan standing ovation for the proposition that there should be no cuts to either Social Security or to Medicare. So there's a second fact. There's a fiscal cash flow cliff coming, and there was a bipartisan virtual pledge that Social Security and Medicare cuts were not on the plan. If you do the math, that only leaves one more factor to avoid going off the fiscal cash flow cliff, and that is revenue to Medicare and Social Security. And while it is unfortunate that there are so many billionaires and so many large corporations who pay no taxes at all or very modest tax rates compared to average folks who are plumbers or firefighters, that does create an opportunity to put Social Security and Medicare on a sound long-term financial footing, victory one, by taking some of the rot and injustice and self-dealing out of the tax code, making it fairer, victory two. So to me, that is a win-win. And I just wanted to take this moment to put a plug in for my Medicare and Social Security Fair Share Act, which would lift the FICA cap for those making over $400,000, consistent with President Biden's pledge, and require those with investment income above $400,000 to pay Social Security tax that wage earners have to pay. It would increase the Medicare tax rate by 1.2%, not a frightening number, 1.2%, for income above $400,000, and it would close the loophole that for a long time has let hedge fund managers and other business operatives avoid Medicare taxes by treating their income as not wages but a distribution. That's often referred to as the Gingrich-Edwards loophole. If we do that, the Social Security chief actuary said we can preserve Social Security's soundness, we can extend Medicare's soundness for decades, and we can give Americans enormous peace of mind that these programs are there for them and will continue to be there for them. So to me, that's a big win, and I was delighted to see President Biden suggest that this was going to be an important part of his work in the remainder of this term and into his next term. I think that if we can deliver for the American public a sound and solid Social Security, a sound and solid Medicare, and do that by making the tax code fairer, then we will have done very good work. So with that point made, I will yield back the floor and thank the chairman for his indulgence.
I thank my colleague, and I don't want anybody to think I'm filibustering. We've got a senator on their way, so I'm going to ask about one other matter. Ms. Lewis, in your opening statement, you talked about your daughter Zoe and her pride in her job through integrated employment. You also mentioned that she is receiving supplemental security income. Given your experience, what should the board focus on, given that experience in your household?
Well, thank you very much, Senator Wyden, for that question. It is a passion issue of mine in that I believe that there are many people receiving supplemental security benefits who are interested in working, but also experience many barriers to work. And we have a very low employment participation rate among the beneficiaries despite many workforce incentive opportunities, and I think it would be beneficial for the board to look further into why we have such a low take-up in terms of participation in the workforce among SSI recipients.
And what is the possible analyses going to be why there is such a low take-up rate? Because my understanding when I'm talking to people at home is there are a lot of folks just like your daughter.
Certainly. I think that there are many reasons. I think, again, I would hope that the board and the staff that supports the board would be able to engage in further research. Anecdotally, we know that many families and individuals with lifelong disabilities perceive that they are not able to work, that they will lose their benefits, they will lose not only their SSI, but their Medicaid and other critical benefits. And I think part of the work is ensuring that people understand these programs are incredibly complex. And as the senator mentioned earlier, it is very challenging for individuals with disabilities to navigate and manage these programs. And if there is an opportunity to offer recommendations to simplify both the communication and the administration of SSI so that individuals can understand the opportunity to work, I think that would be beneficial.
Well, you're being way too logical for Washington, D.C., but I mean, I remember, when I ran the legal aid program for the elderly and the disability office was down the hall, literally I would get calls from individuals who were lawyers, they were engineers, and the call would always be the same way. Hi, Ron, how you doing? I remember seeing you at the Dairy Queen, and you do the senior citizens. So, I'm a lawyer or an engineer, and I'm trying to help Mom, and I can't sort through these programs. I can't sort through all of these issues that we're talking about. So, good on you, and you take that simplification cause when you get to this position, and you just push very, very hard because it's hugely important. I have just a brief closing statement because I'm going to have to go. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Warren to wrap up. But I just want to say on my behalf that I thank members for their participation. I especially want to thank our nominees for their responses. Based on what I have heard today, I strongly support Ms. Tellis's nomination. I urge members to do so. I think Ms. Lewis and Ms. Lang would be valuable members of the Social Security Advisory Board. I strongly support their nominations. As I've indicated, I am troubled by Mr. Biggs and this definition of earned benefits, which I'm still unclear. He says that he was misquoted in a headline and the like. We went back and forth, and he still is expressing a view that I believe could undermine a fundamental foundation of Social Security, this matter of this being earned benefits. And I will tell the people on this panel, I've supported that since the days when I had a full head of hair and rugged good looks and I was director of the Great Panthers, and I'm not changing now. I'm just not changing now. So I cannot support Mr. Biggs's nomination. Just procedurally, regarding questions for the record, the deadline for members to submit questions will be next Monday, February 5th at 5 p.m. The deadline, colleagues, is firm. Senator Crapo and I have discussed this, and I just want to, in turning things over to Senator Warren, thank all the members who've come for their cooperation. Senator Warren will ask the questions at this point, and then she will adjourn the hearing. And Senator Warren, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So all of my colleagues here today agree that Social Security has a solvency problem, which threatens the retirement security of 70 million seniors who've spent their entire lives paying into this program. That leaves us with two options. One, we can shore up the program's finances by making the wealthy pay their fair share, or two, we can cut benefits for millions of hardworking Americans who rely on Social Security to make ends meet. Now, today, the payroll tax that funds the program does not apply to income above $160,000. That means that Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, the richest men in the world, contribute to the Social Security program just as much as your neighborhood dentist. Put a different way, while most Americans spend the entire year paying into the program, these men met their obligation within seconds into their work in the new year. Now, Mr. Biggs, you've been nominated to serve on the Social Security Advisory Board, which provides advice on how to strengthen Social Security. I want to ask you just a series of questions on how you would advise Congress on addressing the program's solvency issues. First, at a Senate Budget Committee hearing in July, you said that raising taxes on higher income people was, quote, inconsistent with Social Security's history and philosophy, and, quote, unnecessary given the already record high levels of Social Security benefits. So I just want to be clear on this. Do you still oppose raising the payroll tax cap for higher income earners?
To be clear, the sorts of issues you're raising right now have never come under the purview of the Social Security Advisory Board. There's no, and it's fine.
I'm asking for your view, and I'm quoting what you've already said. I just want to be clear. Do you still oppose raising the payroll tax cap for higher income people? It's a pretty simple question.
I would prefer not to do it. I could easily.
So you oppose it? Okay. You know, raising the payroll tax income cap so that the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share would extend Social Security's solvency by 75 years. But if you take raising revenue from the wealthiest people off the table, then that leaves one option to extend Social Security's solvency, and that is benefit cuts. Now, one proposal that Republican policymakers have offered is to raise the retirement age. Mr. Biggs, you have previously explained that raising the retirement age would cut benefits for American workers across the board. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And yet, you sat before this committee about a decade ago defending Republican calls to raise the retirement age, claiming that Americans' biggest risk on the job was, quote, carpal tunnel syndrome from their mouse. So that's my last question, Mr. Biggs. Your plan to address Social Security's solvency, which you've called the, quote, flat benefit plan, would, in your words, quote, mean lower future Social Security benefits for middle and high-income earners, end quote. So do you still support cutting benefits for middle-income workers?
What I have proposed would, in fact, pay lower benefits in the future to middle and high-income earners and what is scheduled under current law.
Okay. Look, the point of the Social Security Advisory Board is to provide recommendations on strengthening Social Security for America's workers. I just don't understand why we are being asked to confirm someone whose plan for strengthening Social Security is to gut its protection. But in all fairness to Mr. Biggs, his views are not extreme outliers. His plan is Republicans' plan. Republican policymakers have spent years trying to undermine Social Security by pushing to reduce benefits, to raise the retirement age, and to cut payroll taxes that keep the program alive. As we speak, Republicans in Congress are trying to force through a fiscal commission that would fast-track cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And after moving to defund the program in 2020, former President Trump vowed to look at cuts if he were to win a second term. Democrats want to expand Social Security benefits, and we want to extend the program's solvency so that Americans everywhere can retire with dignity. Those are the solutions that we should be working toward. And with that, I think I'm the last person to ask questions. This hearing is now adjourned.